Live from the City Building in Athens, Ohio, your local source for live city meetings, TGC 15 presents Athens City Council.
Good evening. This is the first meeting in December for Athens City Council. We have a quorum with all members soon to be present. One is on her way. The second item on our agenda is the disposition of minutes. The regular session held November 3rd, 2008. The special session held November 10th, 2008. The regular session held November 17th, 2008. Any corrections or additions?
Madam President, I move adoption of these minutes.
Second.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? They are adopted or approved. Communications. Mr. Sands.
I have two communications to deal with. First of all, the council members have been invited not too long ago to meet with President McDavis for lunch, and that was a very worthwhile, productive lunch. And he is suggesting that we do that again on the 16th of December, 12 o'clock at Stevens. So if anybody has a problem with that, let the clerk of council know, so we might need to reschedule it if there's a lot of problems. And we will mention this again between then. And the second, it's not really communications, but I would like to move that we accept the treasurer's reconciliation reports for January through June of 2008. We tried to do this at our last meeting, but it was a special session, and that wasn't the right venue to do this acceptance. So I move that we accept those reconciliation reports.
Second. Okay, we have a motion. It's been moved and seconded. Any other discussion, comments? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion is adopted. Now we have reports and communications from other elected officials. Mayor Weil?
Not much to really report on. I did receive a letter, or rather petition, from owners of the West Union Street who would like to be considered for the free holiday parking that you see uptown. It was signed by, and this came in the 19th of November, so that's why I missed the last meeting on it. I couldn't tell you about it. This is signed by the owners of the Star of India, Rio Grande, Grinders, Cat's Den, Smiling Skull, Psychopaths, Union Street Cafe, and Athens Computers and more. I guess they feel that would be helpful to have their meters waived as well, along with the uptown. I passed the letter on to Chris Nisley for her view. That's all I have.
Thank you. Kathy?
No report.
Thank you, Madam President. I just have two really brief issues tonight. First, over the holiday weekend, I was down in Texas visiting family and was able to meet with a former member, Dale Tamke. And he just asked that I pass along his greetings to all the members of council and to everyone out there in the city, and so consider that point done. And then on the way back into town, I just heard a news story on WOUB about talking about the state budget situation and about how in the governor's press conference today, he had mentioned how even after this 10% across the board cut at the state level, that we're still projecting at the state level to be $4.7 billion in the red. And I know that doesn't correlate exactly to what's going on in the city, but I just say that as a preface to the resolution, which is going to be up for discussion later. Certainly as a department head, while the law director's office does not have a great deal of employees and we're one of the smaller budgets in the city, you certainly have my support, and if council should choose to enact this freeze, then I will certainly go along with that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Audrey. All right. I think I have everyone then. Ordinances for third reading. 12308, an ordinance authorizing design engineering of the Carpenter Street Improvements Project number 243. Councilmember Sands.
Madam President, I move adoption of ordinance 12308.
Second.
This is an ordinance that we talked about in committee. We had a report from the Streets Department, and then we talked about it before. This is the third reading. This would appropriate $40,000 for the engineering, the preliminary engineering of Carpenter Street improvements. Carpenter Street, as I understand it, from its intersection with Lancaster Street down to its intersection with East State Street would be, the brick would be removed, work would be done on the infrastructure underneath the surface, water lines and sewer lines in particular, and then base would be built and the bricks would be relaid in a manner that we hope would not jar the fire trucks quite so much.
Other comments on 12308?
Did I mention the amount?
You said 40,000.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Too many numbers rolling around in the head.
I'm
Alon?
sorry, I interrupted you.
Oh, no, I just wanted to, this has been said by others as well, but I just wanted to reiterate how pleased I am that we're keeping the bricks in this part of the uptown area, and how important I think that is to the character of Athens.
I agree with you. Anybody else? No other comments? Okay. Then, all those in favor of 12308, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion passes 7-0. Ordinances for second reading, 12508, an ordinance authorizing the mayor to enter into an LPA federal project agreement with the state of Ohio through the Director of Transportation for the rehabilitation of State Routes 33 and 50 within the city of Athens and declaring an emergency. Ordinances for first reading, 12808, an ordinance authorizing the mayor to extend the current contract to provide financial support for the operation of the Athens County Convention and Visitors Bureau. Councilmember Sands.
Madam President, this ordinance would do exactly what the title says. We have had a contract with the Athens County Convention and Visitors Bureau for their work in bringing tourism people and dollars into our area for several years now, and this is funded through the collection of tax on hotel and motel rooms, and the contract allows for the Convention and Visitors Bureau to receive, and I'm sorry, is that 35% of that taxable, the taxes collected. And in this past year, that amounted to about $85,000.
We're on a 3-month delay, so we'll know better by the time we get to that point. Any other comments on this? 12908, an ordinance amending the 2008 appropriations ordinance and authorizing an inter-fund transfer. Councilmember Sands, again.
Madam President, this ordinance has several sections, and I will walk through it because I got confused earlier. It's appropriating $160,000 to the general fund, transaction class 600 for transfer, and $10,500 to the street fund. And that $10,500 to the street fund would be appropriated from the general fund for certification and training for the employees who work in the streets department. Section 2 authorizes the auditor to make an interfund transfer of that $160,000 from the general fund to the transportation assistance fund, which is a fund from which we pay for gasoline for the bus system. And Section 3, we would appropriate that transferred money to the Transportation Assistance Fund Transaction Class 300, which would allow it to be expended for 2008 gasoline and fuel charges. The idea being that we wanted to pay up to the end of 2008 our gasoline and other fuel bills for the bus system, so that we would have a very clear picture in 2009 of the expenses versus the income for our bus system in the city.
Other comments? Well, I'd like to add that one of the things that I think is happening now, that we have some increases in at least the utilities, that we're trying to stay current, so I'd like to underline what Jim said about that. And we let a bill go, I mean, $160,000 is kind of a chunk of change, but now the mayor is riding herd on his people, as I understand it, and keeping them current. Is that correct, Mayor Weil?
I'm trying to do that. What this represents is the charge we are charged for McDonald Transit for our bus system per month. They charge us by the hour of running of services. Last year, we were about, at the end of the year, we were 3 months in arrears. This represents about 3 months that was taken off the front end of our appropriation. It includes the gas as well, which we have, of course, get back charged because they are picking up gas at the pumps at OU. I think, as Kathy pointed out, since this is we're trying to do a voucher on this, we may want to suspend rules on a second reading if we have it soon.
We'll have it.
Okay?
We haven't done the budget yet. The $10,500 is money already spent, I assume, or are they going to be away at Christmas? Do you know?
I don't know. The Service Safety Director talked to us about this last time, and I don't recall when this training.
I think it's money already spent, but I
Okay,
wouldn't be sure.
that's
Training already.
Done. Already
Training
accomplished.
already done.
accomplished,
Yeah.
right.
Bills to
Okay,
do.
that's good. All right. We are moving along. One reading resolution, R1008, a resolution requesting the mayor and the other elected officials institute a hiring freeze until a position review has taken place. Introduced by Councilmembers Bain and Sands. We mentioned it last week. Mr. Sands?
Madam President, your name is first.
It's alphabetical, man. Okay, we say in here, whereas the City Council believes all vacant positions should be carefully reviewed prior to filling in order to alleviate any need for a reduction in force, while at the same time recognizing that some vacant positions will by necessity be advertised and filled. Then it goes on to say that requested to institute a hiring freeze, we would assume that they will be in talking to us should a position become available, and we will be able to see this happening if it happens. We've been pretty stable in our workforce until recently, so I don't assume it's going to happen, but it's due diligence, I think, on our part to do this. That's what we're trying to do. We're not saying no, we're just saying we want to know, not automatic. We're in kind of a buffered position, I do believe, for at least a few months until the next year comes. So, but we are trying very hard, as you will see next Monday, sort of a preview of coming attractions. I know, Jim, I dodged the bullet by being in Maryland, so it's only fitting and proper that I would start this off, despite what I said earlier. So it's just a due diligence measure on our part. Jim?
And I just want to add, point out the language that the Council of the City of Athens requests the mayor and other elected officials to observe this hiring freeze. We don't hire people, and so we would not be involved in that. But as Member Bain has said, we think it's due diligence for all new hires to be very carefully considered in this time period.
Okay.
I would just add that when I first started on council, there was in fact a soft hiring freeze in place in the city, and we changed the allocation of where income tax revenues went and took money out of cap and put more money into general revenue to keep our budget balanced, and that this type of measure is something that we've used before.
Okay. Mayor Weil.
Excuse me. Right now, what we have is, I think there's the Assistant Service Safety Director is still open. Assistant to the Service Safety Director is still open, although she has actually put an offer to somebody. At this point, I think we're short one police officer that I'm aware of. The testing is ongoing, but actually we'll probably stop at that point, since we've already scheduled the testing. But other than that, I don't know of anything that's pending, to my knowledge. I'll let you know if something comes up.
Thank you.
And again, part of the thing is, if you just have to go Google city budget and deficits, and you'll get a load of information from where everybody else is.
Okay, other comments? Allahu?
I think this is probably a wise move. I'm wondering if one of you could clarify what a position review would mean in this case. By whom, what that would entail.
I think I could go. A position review would be first by the department head that was hiring this person, and secondly, then it would go to the personnel director and possibly even the mayor or the service safety director to review and make that approval for that position. We're just asking for a careful review of everything. Not that we would suggest that new hires are not always carefully reviewed, but we're going to be even tighter.
More so,
now.
yeah.
And I would even extend that and to say that I would expect that the administration would bring the review to council, at least so we have some idea, especially if things get tighter. And I assume that in the spirit of the way it's worked up until now, I don't see that as any different from the way the behavior has been, so. We can always defund positions too, but I don't think we're going to get to that at all. There's not even a slight chance of that. That wasn't a threat, that was just a comment. Announcements and other business. The first announcement is that we will be having a special session next Monday night in which we will be reading the multitude of budget ordinances for the first time. Oh, we didn't vote.
We didn't vote.
Oh, my goodness.
Minor details.
Minor detail. Let's go back. I was ready to roll on the other thing. Do I have a motion? I move to adopt R 1008.
Second.
Okay. It's an inside job. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. The motion passes 6-1. Announcements and other business. We are going to have a special session next Monday night. I don't know at what time. We'll let Debbie make the decision. You want to do it first? Let's see whose committee is potentially meeting. Anybody? Chris?
Transportation.
Environment?
Yeah, we'll have a guest from Volunteer Energy Services to talk about the aggregation process for natural gas.
How long do you think that'll last, Allahu?
I can keep it short, 10 minutes.
Used to be a city manager. It might be longer than that.
I'll get with him beforehand.
Well, I know, and many of us were at the meeting in which they talked about this earlier. So should we go for a 7 o'clock meeting start, Debbie? Break at 7:30 for committees, for council? Start committees at 7, council meeting. Do we want ordinance that was read the second time and the first reading ordinance is on as well? Okay. Other committees, any others? Okay. Opportunity for citizens to speak on legislative items and city services not covered on the agenda. Please state your name and address. Greg? Got to stop meeting like this.
Granville Avenue, Athens, Ohio. First want to say to City Council, thank you for putting another infusion of money into the Granville Mary project. I'm happy with that. There's some issues about management of the project that I'm not happy with. I will email people the details of what my perspective is. This morning just quickly, it was over the weekend, I had this feeling that something wasn't going right. I haven't been able to get in my driveway or even walk up my driveway for over a week and a half. Just at intermittent times. It's kind of slippery and dangerous and that sort of thing. Well, this morning I got up and yesterday I got back from Thanksgiving and I came up to the driveway, took a look at it, and I thought, this is not going away. The street director had told me that how they were going to replace my driveway the way it was originally, because there's like almost a 1.5 foot difference now from the street to the grade on my driveway. Anyway, so I had a conversation with the contractor, and I think they'd be interested to know about this, because I've had experiences like this before in the past with city contractors. I'm not saying this is a particular situation. Maybe I don't have all the information. But I said, that's not what I was told, which was, they just said, we're just going to put a form in and pour concrete and that'll be it. And I said, no, that's what they did 10 years ago, and they did a pretty bad job then, too. So I said, don't touch it. And I went to see Ron Lucas, who's the second in command, because Andy Stone, the street director, wasn't in, and have a conversation with him. And I told him that, what I needed and what I'd been promised. I come back after studying at Alden Library all day long. Guess what? Concrete's poured, in the base of my driveway, just like the contractor said he was going to do, with no consultation from me whatsoever, except that's it. But wait, he said, I'm going to do it that way because that was in engineering plans. I have not even seen this contractor use a transit yet. That's all I have to say. Thanks.
Anyone else? I guess we have.
Any questions? I'm sorry.
Okay, it's not done yet. Well, we don't normally converse with you here, Greg, so we'll give you 1 minute when we're through.
Okay.
Okay, that would probably, any others?
Yeah.
All right, having completed all our business, we're now adjourned. You all have 2 minutes to talk to Greg, and then we will be back with finance and personnel. Okay. Look how much you talk. Okay. With that threat in mind, I passed out to my colleagues on council a copy of the city ordinance, 3 ordinances that we would be working with. The non-union personnel salary and fringe benefit package, which is in the top one, we're going to walk through very quickly. The second one is the authorized staffing levels. And should the mayor choose to recommend such, we would, for example, under patrol officer, we could say not funded. That would be, depends on how it all comes out. And the last item on the agenda in your stack is the 2009 slotting. And it's, last year in May and June, we were very uncertain about our financial situation, so 2009 slotting may be pretty much done until May or June of this year, until we know what our carryover is, or carry forward, or whatever we choose to call it. Okay, so taking a look at the city ordinance that we have, the non-personnel salary and fringe packet, you can see how it's set up. This is the way the law is basically appears in the code book, basically appears, and we have, first of all, definitions, and this is something that we did last year, where we designated non-salaried and salaried employees, and it had to do with overtime and compensatory time. We have the longevity list for all people hired before or rehired before December 31st, 2001. And you can see that's on page 4. After 5 years of service, 1%. And then after 15 years of service, 6% of annual wages. And it ends up being a fair amount of money, somewhere between $250,000 in the total city and $300,000. So it's a strange little, it's something that we do here. It's different at Ohio University. Then it's just a, once in a great while, once every 5 years, longevity infusion happens. It's not a consistent thing, but this is something that we worked very hard to eliminate. It's going to take a total turnover of the workforce before it happens, but those of you who are here in a few years, you need to pay attention to the fact that some people are going to be lagging in salary. So put that in your, that in the tree standards. Put that in your head to think about in the future when you're here. Okay, anything in longevity you want to mention or look at here that seems to jump out at you? I cannot, the anniversary date thing is something that, if I had energy, I'd probably ask about it, but right now I'm not going to ask about it. All right, overtime. So notice under 3 on overtime on page 5, Those employees eligible for overtime compensation under the Fair Labor Standards Act shall be paid overtime for time worked in excess of 40 hours per week at the rate of time and 1/2. And so you have that spelled out. Last year, I believe, Mr. Sand, you want to hop in? You just go right ahead. Last year,
You were heading there.
last year, we designated who was and who was not eligible for overtime.
Actually, the personnel director did that review.
And we
Yeah.
reviewed it, I'm sorry. We just pushed and pushed and pushed and got it done, right?
Yes.
That was, we were on the other end going this way. Okay, and then you have what's going on in that area. You also can see the fire shift pattern there in that. You see how much is in the code? It's amazing, huh? Notice D, that one is an interesting point. Overtime will not be granted under this ordinance except for personnel specifically authorized by the mayor or service safety director or appropriate elected official. Okay, so there you go. One thing that is kind of a problem, again, for your future would be, we may have solved it, but there's quite a bit of unpaid compensatory time out there stored up. And if those people retire, we're going to have to pay up quite a goodly amount of money. And so that's one of those things that's out there always when we have a changeover in personnel. If you like, you could ask the auditor to give you a list of who has outstanding compensatory time. It's a lot of money, isn't it, Kathy? And actually, in some budgets, they would require that we have that money on hand. I think that has not been the case with us.
And
Yeah.
is that spelled out here? Is there an upper limit on the amount of compensatory time
I
that can
thought
be
we
accrued?
did, but I don't know. It was such a struggle.
Page 24.
Page 24? Yeah, it's, well, see, we did. I thought we did, as I said.
See, there's a limit.
200, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Section C has a limit in it.
Thank you.
Okay, so you can see, and one of the things is, you can see the accrued balances of comp time at termination of employment or promotion to a position not eligible, paid at a rate not less than average rate over the last 3 years, years of employment, and the final regular rate, whichever one is higher. We tussled with that one for a while. Okay, vacations, the next. We're just doing this so you get a feel for what's going on in the city, how the money flows and goes. I mean, we're happy to have people working for us and doing the job they do, but it's always good to know what's out there. Vacation time. You see 3/4 time employees are prorated 75%. 1 year of service, 8 years of service, 25 years of service, you have vacation credit granted. So we have that to do. Okay, questions? Number 5 is retirement. We may make Kent's deadline yet. All city positions covered by this ordinance shall be included in the city's retirement plan. That is Ohio Public Employees Retirement System and Ohio Police and Fire Fund. So we have those two operating in our pension fund, I should say. And as you can see, it spells out how we pick up. It talks about the pickup procedure. It goes back to 94. It says there, the total salary for each employee and official shall be the salary otherwise payable under the city ordinance. Sometimes it's confusing. It's always good to know what's going on. Questions? Life insurance is next. That one will be quick. It's in section 15 of this exhibit, medical insurance. There's some things that are going to change on this. We don't know exactly how they're, what?
Yeah, I was going to say that's not in there yet.
It's not in here, so this one will change. One thing that was new last year, the year before it was the drug plan, but we did put in last year, after a major, it was just a big effort to get it in, but we did put in the, what we would call well baby, but now it's covered. So, I mean, we have a much better healthcare system, as you all know from being in various meetings, but that's in here. This is going to change, and so when we read it, we will have to have a slightly different language in this. This will change, so you'll see some strikeout there. Up until now, we haven't done much changing, have we? Family medical leave, again, according to the law. One question somebody asked us for was, would it be possible that an immediate family member, and it may have been in fact covered under 2 on page 13, in order to care for immediate family member, spouse, child, or parent, if the employee of such immediate family member has of such an immediate family member has a serious health condition. Anyway, there are potentially some change. I guess there probably won't be any changes there, but it's covered by law. It's pretty much spelled out. And this is important for because we have to make sure that our employees are able to meet their familial obligations. You can see how those are spelled out. You know, for example, employee on unpaid family or medical leave will not accrue vacation or sick leave. That's under item J on page 15. Questions about this? Are you overwhelmed? You want me to slow down so we can...
No, it's very interesting.
Oh, you surely just. Educational requirements, and you can see what is
You have
there.
a nice reading voice.
Oh, come on, flattery will get you nowhere. Educational requirements, you have some job requirements spelled out. We have fire chief, fire captain, EMTA, first aid for first-time responders, and CPR certificate. Plant manager, class 3 operator licenses, as you can see, and the various things that are spelled out in that. And those are part of our requirements. And if there are other requirements in the Ohio Revised Code, we're not going to interfere with those as well. Professional license and educational incentive pay. This is one that I'm not sure I still understand after 2 decades, but we'll look at it. Professional license and educational incentive pay. If you have a class 1, 2, or 3, whichever one, you get $40 per pay. And this would only work for employees working in water or sewer maintenance. So in order to have the number of licenses that we need, this is how we do it. And you can see the other ones also there, with the pay periods identified. This ends up adding to the salaries of those people who have that licensure. And it says employees hired or rehired after January 1st, 2002 will not be eligible to receive professional license and/or educational incentive pay. Okay, and a commercial driver's license should be obvious. Parking, hang tags to cover parking. Clothing allowance, this is a little contentious in some arenas. The clothing allowance, city shall furnish where appropriate uniforms, such items of protective clothing as gloves, boots, hard hats, and cold weather gear. Council may need hard hats after a while, but anyway, here we are. Necessary by the Service Safety Director to protect employees on the job assignments. And then we have the police and fire personnel also have a clothing allowance, which we have, and then the chief is allowed another 100 annually.
Police and fire, theirs is covered by their union contract. I mean, it's specified by their union contract.
Yes, good.
Chief is in reference to both fire and police, or just fire chief?
I remember sponsoring that ordinance. I thought it was a fire chief. but
Fire chief only.
We might need to check on that one. It looks a little loose, doesn't it? Okay, sick leave. Anybody who's retired understands this one. Sick leave amounts are 4.6 hours per pay. Then we have fire personnel. Number C is part of this when people go, we have usually a fairly large chunk of change to dispose of. Employees who retire, an employee who retires shall be eligible for liquidated sick leave pay on a 4-to-1 ratio of accumulation to pay basis. On the basis for, the limitation basis is 960 hours. So it would be 1/4 of that, and you can do the math and figure out how much would be available at that point in time, depending on the pay grade and the rest. It's fairly close, I think, to what OU does for those people that have sick leave. Fairly close. You know, they cash you out for 30 days, right, Paul? Didn't that happen to you? If you
I
have
didn't
it?
retire, so I didn't get any.
Okay, you didn't get any? I didn't have any because I wasn't a person that accrued sick leave. but-
Well, there's the retirement part where you have to retire. That's not just that you leave the city and go to another job. You have to actually retire.
I
to
forgot
get-
about that in you, I'm sorry, I was
the
just
sick
I'm trying to
payout.
find. Do you know what they pay at
Yeah.
OU, Kathy?
No,
It's
I
about
don't.
30 days, I think, isn't it?
Probably, because the other cash out, we only have 2 employees, I think only one now, whoever took advantage of that, longtime employees of the, in excess of 960 hours. That is, you know, employees who've been long-term employees are still working for us, and instead of just continuing to accrue more sick leave, they can cash it out if it's over that amount. In the
That's what-
past, it was the recreation director and the fire chief. So those are really kind of 2 different things there regarding sick leave.
So is it the case, I mean, I was really at the first paragraph, I hadn't gotten down to the second one, which is one of my most favorite paragraphs in this ordinance. But an employee who retires shall be eligible for liquidated on a 4-to-1 ratio. So that would mean if they're based on 960 hours, if you divide that by 4, it's 240 hours, which is 6 weeks roughly of pay? Or do we go on a 35?
Oh, I don't know.
Okay, nor do I.
Offhand, I know.
I don't, it's
Good
just, all
question.
right, so there's another cha-ching for you, so you get to see it. This paragraph, I personally would like to strike under C, the second one. I think sick leave is sick leave, and if you don't use it, you can take some of it out, but since Kathy says it isn't very much.
Well, it isn't used very often, but the other, yeah. They may elect to do that, so they don't have to. So if you're a long-term employee who hasn't used up a lot of sick leave, and you continue to accrue it, then that would increase your payout if you retire, which would cost us more.
Except that this would, you know, but less than 1,200 hours. You can look at that one and see what you think. As I said, this is one of my favorites. Never having had. No, it's, right, I did have sick leave, I just didn't have vacation time.
Nancy? And
Yeah.
Kathy, with the limit on the 960 hours that could be cashed out when somebody retires, they wouldn't continue to accrue more because that is capped at 960, right? So it wouldn't be just deferring that cash out if you took that second thing out.
Right. Guys, look at it and see.
Well, yeah, it wouldn't cost us anything, as far as that goes.
But sick leave is sick leave. I mean, you know,
Yeah.
I was happy not to have used mine.
Right.
I mean, you know, to have been healthy. And so I just think that.
Yeah, sick leave is not vacation time. It's a safety net
least
for
we hope not.
employees. It's not really a benefit to be taken care of.
Okay. Anybody else? Any ideas?
Yeah, I'm wondering if we should continue to allow people to accumulate up to 960 hours that we pay out on retirement.
For 6 weeks?
Yeah.
Well,
I think
university
that
does
sounds a little high.
120, I think. Okay, so that's one that we can be looking at, if not this year, next, huh? Think about that one. That's a place where, if we do that, Allahu, I'd really like to do it over 2 years
Phase it.
Mhm.
Phase it in.
and say that, so I'd really like to whack the second paragraph under C, but it's just my attitude towards what is sick leave. I mean, sick leave is it's like insurance. I'm always happy when I don't use my accident insurance. Okay, granting of sick leave, there's some rules there you can look at. For example, paid absence days are there, funeral leave. These were all for in the non-union. Retirement awareness. Oh, yes. Even if you aren't thinking about it, your body tells you, believe me. Number 15, employees who wish to attend retirement awareness seminars. And it talks about how they might leave under this section. They can go and plan ahead. It's nice because then the city has some idea that they might be facing some changes there. Military leave, that one is totally covered by law. I've been through first the Gulf War and then this war. We just respond. I think we responded pretty generously in both cases. You can see some of our city and county officials are joint funded, like we could cross out, I think, the animal control officer at this point in time, and the bailiff and the muni court clerk, city and county. We pay the benefits and the county pays part of their salary. Okay, now we get to number 18. Last year, in an effort to clear up some things that were out of hand, we agreed to 18. And I would like to propose that we revert to our old language because, and Kathy wasn't there, but we were talking in meetings, and what happens is this is extremely generous. If there is money in the budget, you can go out to Career Connections, you can hire all kinds of different people. And we just saw that in sewer last week, where in sewer admin, they had used some of the money for a person that wasn't in the pay list, and we had to change money around to cover the cost of meeting the payroll. In other words, we should have some reasonable way of estimating or designating who is on our payroll. It shouldn't just be at the, and I sponsored the ordinance, I feel really bad about that, because it seems to me that it was way too generous. It just let whoever was the budget head make a decision about what was going to go on. Our old ordinance was much more specific, and I'd like to return to that. Do we have a copy of it?
That's it?
That's it?
It has a
Okay.
strikeout in here.
Yeah, a person's working as part-time, intermittent, temporary under this section shall not be eligible for City of Athens fringe benefits except a parking permit. Okay, so there was a lot of flex in here, which I think we need to curtail because it was a very expensive flex. Any comments, Jim?
No, I'm confused about what you're asking. Debbie has a question.
I've been looking at this for a little bit here, and I think the concern is whether a lot of additional people are being hired without going through just the normal process and fitting into the budget. And I think that's a really important thing for us to get a handle on. But I think some of these definitions are probably really helpful. The stuff that's been stricken out that's more specific than this. And I wonder if the major question is in A, where it talks about people being able to be paid more than the minimum in the old A, or the current A, where it says new employees and rehires who are part-time can start at a higher rate if they have exceptional qualifications. Like, I wonder if that's some of the excessive flexibility, but maybe some of these definitions about what's an intern, what's intermittent, and what's seasonal are still helpful.
Yeah, I don't know that the definitions ever were brought into play. It says seasonal employees and recreation other than maintenance are not included. So what can we do to work around this? Maybe we need to look at it more. I know what I thought it said, and then I know what happened. I know that we had, and I would prefer to have people listed in the ordinance as employees. I would prefer to blend them together and give them benefits. I don't think we need to be running a sort of like an employment bureau. I was almost saying the local agency that does that sort of thing in town, where we would hire, the mayor could, or the auditor could hire somebody in a time of emergency, but we don't have to give that right to every budget manager. I mean, I think that we would want to cover any contingency, but we don't want to have a lot of additional people sitting around. Maybe that's not the right way to say it. Maybe somebody ought to bail me out before I get in so deep.
You don't want excessive government.
I don't want to, I'm fine with excessive government. I just don't want. My foot is very fine. Jim?
I thought what we were hoping to get at was some limitation on interns, part-time personnel, and maybe the definitions are important to identifying those positions, but I don't think there's language here. I've been trying to read through the strike-throughs. I don't think there's language here that imposes that limitation on the number of these part-time employees. And maybe we just need to come to some kind of agreement what that would be. And we probably need to involve those budget heads that you were talking about, people who would budget for that issue.
Well, we've actually just used right now, in order to see how close we are to the end, we've just put in the ones that are in the staffing ordinance. Oh, yeah. And now we'll look at the interns in a moment, which are defined in the staffing ordinance itself. Well, if we proceed to that in a moment, you will see.
The auditor has it.
Yeah.
Well, I just wanted to point out the fact that this deals with employees who are employed out of the personal services lines in our budget. And I think some of the other part-time people that you see are brought on temporarily, as you said, through a local employment agency, are paid out of professional services, which is the 2 and 300s. So, there's just a difference here when you address these actual employees, whether they're seasonal, part-time, or intermittent. They're not really covered under this when they're paid out of professional services.
So, in other words,
So you can limit this all you want, and somebody can still use professional services money and hire somebody to work. Does that
Okay,
make sense?
well then, that's all right. Then they just won't have money to have gasoline in their vehicles at the end of the year. And they'll be back saying to us, we need money. And, so this is a way to, Jim, you want to help me before I get any further into this?
Well,
We never had these other definitions. I mean, let's take a look at the staffing ordinance for a moment. I mean, it's just like, we did it last year at the end. I mean, you would have had to been here, I think, in order to understand what I'm saying. And go to the intermittent, temporary, seasonal, full, and part-time. And we actually have now on page, this is in the ordinance that's landscape, sideways. Okay, so what we had was as needed before, and it was pretty much out of hand. And you can see the maximum number instead of as needed, which was there. That was part of the problem. People think that that would probably solve the problem with that. Intern, part-time, I don't know. I thought these were always interns, not part-time. I don't know what the cost of this is. I mean, because up until now, we're close in the mayor's budget. Did you include these interns in your line for 9.3 million?
No, not really. Oh, yes, wait a second. I did include some interns. There are some interns in some of the fund lines.
Well, I think that what I would like to consider is, having sponsored students repeatedly for this. I think there's the intern, that's the gopher intern, and then there's the single-purpose Elaine Getz, sun power, whatever type of intern where they're doing a distinct, they're not working 40 hours a week or 20 hours a week for the whole year, but are working on a project that has a beginning and an end. It would be easier if we had some notion of how those would break down.
I would have to go back into the spreadsheet on this and find out where the interns are put in. There are interns, I know in the other admin, there's at least one intern.
And that's why it's up there in your budget, because
At least, yeah. I see you put two in there. I see council has as needed, so that's pretty flexible too.
That is only, that is for cable.
That's for cable. Does it say?
And I would
as
be
needed?
happy to put a number in there.
Okay.
But the potential cost of this area is, I mean, with 9.3 million already in your 100 line, I mean, could add to it. I don't know.
I forget, I didn't bring last year's budget. I thought I did.
Well, it just
but-
says as needed in last year's budget, which means you just spend when you have the money, and then you come back to council and say, we need money to cover our payroll in sewer admin, for example. That's what happened last week. I mean, I didn't raise a stink about it, but I was kind of indignant that,
I wasn't aware that was the cause. I assumed it was
yeah,
overtime.
it was part of the cost.
Okay.
So,
Again, I have no problem with what you're talking about here. It gives you a definite number. We may need to change it depending on what goes on. I see street has seasonal workers, 12 of them. And I know the dialogue I have with Andy is that when he does the Carpenter Street,
he needs more,
he'll need more.
right.
Because
And we actually talked about that.
otherwise he ends up doing it, and that's a high price thing for him to do.
We can't afford to have him be doing that. But what I see happening with this is maybe going back to a slightly more managed council, putting parameters on it. And that's what we were, there used to be a footnote on here that actually did define seasonal. And that's actually what we could do. We could define what an intern is on this as a footnote. We could put a, I don't know about temporary. I don't know that temporary is something, but seasonal, full, and part-time employees. We could almost revert to the old one, the old spreadsheet that's there. The as-needed was something that we probably don't want in times of budgetary tightness, in my opinion. Yes?
And at the same time, I would hope that it's a conversation that's ongoing, because if we need more seasonal people to do a brick street, that's a lot cheaper than paying our regular
Yeah.
guys overtime to do it.
Oh, we wouldn't do that. I mean, we we know that he has to have more. What I would like to do is also, though, go back to revisit the issue of pickup of grass clippings and make it to the point where it's a trade-off. I mean, do you want to spend 50, 60, 70,000 picking up grass, or do you want to do this? But that's just me. I'm the only one. I'm not going to do it. I just have this feeling I'd like to see it happen.
I would go to with my father's method of just grinding.
No!
And it ends
This is
up
my meeting, you
It
can't
ends
do
up in the
that.
storm sewer. It's very nice. It just goes and
And my
mulches
father
down
always
Hawks
picked them
River.
up. Okay, so does anybody have a serious problem with making a limit on these, whatever it is? I would like you also to
Traditional,
note that if
traditional.
you go back through time, we have put in additional temporary interns. So, for example, Lorraine McCosker worked as an intern for council, and she was on, I can use her name in vain, she was on as a temporary intern in council. We increased it temporarily and then left it off at the end of the year. Okay, so this does not preclude doing that if our funds are there. It's just, we're not going to have as many extra dollars out there. And this starts to put a limit on it. Do you know, if you know how many Andy wants, we can try and work that out. But he has financial limits imposed by the income tax mix at this time in his own budget, doesn't he? Well, look at this. This is a proposal, I think, isn't it? This is the proposal translating, taking other admin up to the mayor's budget and, basically seeing, is this where it is? Some of these are not used at this point in time. I think it's true, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I haven't filled my positions, and I have.
Right, and I know you have
yes.
the idea for Cool Cities, and I think Cool Cities is clearly one that we want to see.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that you could have that as a special, keep your intern and then add that to it. But at some point, we have to talk turkey about, not necessarily with the mayor, but in general, some of these other funds about what is needed and how we will pay for it.
What will do is pass this along to the staff and see if they, what their reflections and feedback is on this. That's
It's
it.
only been a year, so we can't say it's always been this way.
I know.
And that, I was just going to say, that I thought that that's what we were
We said,
hoping
oh,
that we would go back to these people who are allowed these interns, who are using these interns or not using them, and find out so that we
we can
have a better
go, we
picture.
can go 3 months into the year, and if our financial situation looks really flush, then we can add them. I mean, it's just a question of how much money we have. Here's the salary demands within longevity, here's our relatively flat income. What are we going to do? I mean, this is one place where we can start to pull in the reins a little bit. Anybody else, any thoughts? Yes?
Thank you, Madam President. I appreciate the dialogue and discussion on defining these positions. I think, to me, that seems helpful and relevant. But I'm curious, though, and this is just for conversation's sake and banter here, as far as cost of living increases or rates or considerations there, I mean, how are we, as a whole, doing with that?
Well, with respect to interns, the basement was the mandated minimum wage. And then it's above that. Everything has been raised. I mean, last year it was $7, now it's $7.30, unless I've got my numbers mixed up. And so we added, as we went up, we added numbers. I mean, are you looking at this, or?
I'm still on the cross-out sheet, but
Okay.
strikeout sheet, but the horizontal sheet.
Okay. So did that answer your question?
To a certain degree, I mean, I understand that part of being an intern is learning experience and the benefit you gain from that, but I'm also curious about just how we're doing in general with other employees or part-time employees. I know it's hard to make an honest living out there today. Just wondering how we're doing as an employer.
Yeah, I would say that you would expect, although some interns may come back and work for us or run for office and take our place after this, you would expect that they would move on. I mean, very few, with respect to the city, being working in the auditor's office, if there's an opening, maybe you could move right into it. But in general, they would move on.
And part-timers are...
Right, and you would have the benefit of their enthusiasm and then the next year's enthusiasm. Or maybe they'd be there permanently doing this work forever as a part-time person without benefits, which is probably not, to my way of thinking, a very ideal thing.
Right.
We don't want to be at the sort of Wally's World of the city. We would like to, I mean, if we have people doing a job, they should, or at least I'd like to strive for it.
Yeah.
Do you have a question? Anybody? It's been quiet on this end. Yeah, I wanted to do this a couple of weeks ago. Aren't you glad we didn't? It would be so.
I was just going to add, for folks who may not know, we do have some people who've retired and who come back during busy times and help out just to have a little bit of work. So, I mean, there are also part-time people who may not be necessarily starting off, but we have some retired people who come back and pitch in during busy times of year.
Okay.
And that, you could point certain lines in this where that is the case.
Okay.
But, if you have a change in director, or a change in head of the department, or a chief, then that person should be allowed to make decisions on allocation of resources within the limits that we've set, and that's what we're doing, setting limits, if you go along with it. Okay, anybody else? I'm getting closer to mine than yours. Designated holidays, if we move on. You can see why the designated holidays, I believe the mayor has, I won't even bring that up. I remember various times where it was always a tussle between who was going to close what. That was a couple mayors ago. Okay, 20. Yeah.
I think I just put a letter about the designated holidays.
Right.
What dates
We
are.
settled it finally, but
Okay.
there used to be two different, like the one mayor wanted to do it one way, the auditor another,
Okay.
but back in the bygone days.
So the mayor
Was that
designates...
a power that was just wonderful to use? Did it give you a rush?
I don't know. I was in here most of the weekend, so I don't know.
That's called salaried employee.
Yeah, that's it right
We've all
there.
been there and done that. It's like cha-ching doesn't happen.
So it's not that wild and wonderful. is it?
I didn't think so. I could hardly imagine it. Yes, Allahu.
I like seeing on the list at the bottom there, the employee's birthday as a holiday.
Yeah.
I think that's a nice touch.
Yeah, you just try that at OU.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, class, you're not meeting today. It's my birthday. First of all, I wouldn't admit I have one. Okay, so it talks about regular three-quarters time, full-time employees are covered by this ordinance. It talks about how we deal with the paid holidays, and we all went over, I think, the holiday pay last week.
Nancy,
Yeah.
seeing that three-quarters time, going back to number 18, the part-time paragraph, it says less than 40. Was that an oversight, and it should have said less than three-quarters time, or?
I think you probably better, I highlight it and we better change it. For a while, the only person in the city who was three-quarters time was our clerk, right? And she now ranges where, she does either ranges between three-quarters and full, I think. Right? No? Full-time? Full-time now? Oh, I had something for you to do in the summer. Oh, no. I'm right on top of things. 20, transfer, promotion, demotion, reclassification. That's somebody else's. Okay, compensatory time, step increases. Oh, goodness, okay, we'll worry about this in June, but you can see all non-bargaining units are hired into pay grades 1 through 8, which we'll be looking at shortly, as reviewed and approved separately. We don't approve each individual, as Jim said earlier, but we will do it in June again. 1 through 6 will start at the designated rate of pay and receive step increases after the 6-month probationary period. And then it goes on and talks about the other areas. Increases will thereafter occur every 12 months until the employee reaches the midpoint of the salary grade. Increases subsequent to reaching the midpoint will be awarded as part of the annual raise pool as determined by City Council. And last year, we didn't do it right away. Probably caused ourselves some trouble. But anyway, so having said that, we have moved to this June date, and we might, once we get a more stable funding situation, we probably can go back, but it's very difficult at this time of year to know. One year we said 3%, another year we said 2%, but now we have the continuation of the 1,000, so we're safe a little bit. But at some point in the future, that's the other consideration. The mayor would not have only have been here all weekend, he would be here 24/7 trying with that one, right? And luckily, we don't have to do the step increases. I guess it's easy with Excel, it's just hard to pay for. Okay. Notice non-bargaining unit C, hired into pay grade 7 and 8, will not receive step increases and may be hired by elected officials at a rate of up to 25% above the minimum for the grade. Initial placement above or below these levels requires direct approval by City Council. Annual increases in grades 7 and 8 will be awarded as part of the annual merit pool as determined by City Council. It would be my great hope that eventually we'll get an evaluation procedure and that will mean something, but at this point, it was pretty across the board when we tried to do it. We had good ideas, good intentions.
I see here, Madam President, if I may interrupt you, that letter E sort of addresses a question I had for you earlier. Each year, the salary range will be reviewed in relation to the annual cost of living. Every odd-numbered year, the Mayor's Service Safety Director, Personnel Director will conduct a pay study that includes other municipalities.
We've done that.
Thank you.
Yeah, we were using a linear regression model to do it. And so it was, I mean, you just, if you think about what that means. Everybody does it their own way. Okay, employee assistance program, very important part of this. People who have issues can will not be responsible for charges, but there is a way that will assist people in those substance abuse categories, mental health categories. Non-discrimination, including sexual orientation or disability. Voluntary fitness incentive program. This is some of you have talked about this one. Full-time employees who are enrolled in voluntary fitness incentive program at Athens Community Center will receive individual memberships. An individual membership as long as they participate in and comply with the requirements of the programs. Some people have said that in order to beef up the budget, they thought maybe we should look at that. Anybody for looking at that? Asking for money?
To ask money for, to
Well, I don't know who I heard.
discontinue?
It's one of you, there are 6 other people, and one or more of you have said maybe we ought to make them pay their own.
Yeah, I do recall hearing that dialogue.
Yeah.
Do we know how many employees participate in
That
that?
would be a good question. I
Good
can see.
question. Maybe the people who are doing the recreation budget can figure that one out.
Let's get on that.
No, I mean, we want them to be fit, but I've heard people say that as an issue.
Yeah.
Now, you didn't know about those other issues that I've dragged out. No, I was trying to put your issues out on the table. If not this year, next. It's how you can always postpone it. Yeah.
Yeah, I brought it up, and it was because just knowing that Ohio University does charge the university employees.
I wouldn't have been able to say that. You shouldn't have confessed.
For WellWorks?
They do charge it.
At
So
one
It
time-
would be interesting to see what's.
Was it a free service at one time?
Never.
Never? So
I don't think it
OU
ever
has
is.
always, the employees have always paid? Nothing's paid.
So,
Parking is free at OU.
Go ahead.
That's right.
If you're,
I just want to
For
say
now.
that I, for one, I think we should offer that to our employees, just as a benefit, and encourage them to use it.
Could you,
A
as long
healthier
as it's not
workforce is
during the
better for
day.
everybody, I think.
Yeah, as long as it's during their time off, right?
Right.
Would you
Ask-
get back to us?
yes. I'm supposed to speak with Rich tomorrow
Keep putting it off.
to make an appointment. Well, the holiday got in the way.
I know. I can't, I've got something I know I'm going to continue to do it. Okay, look, we have authorized staffing levels right here. You can look through that and see where the numbers in the 100 category came from. You can see what fund they're paid from. For example, one thing you would find that the general fund, 101, we added the other admin people into that. That would be the personnel director, 70% of the safety service director, assistant to the service safety director, the service safety director herself. Okay, and then you can see the auditor has a number of employees. You can see where they are with respect to that, and then those are translated in the next piece of paper, but this is the authorized staffing levels. Should the mayor choose to not use his power to fund the patrol officer until, we did before, as Debbie alluded to, can put in the ordinance one unfunded. We could also whack it back to 19. I prefer the one unfunded, but I'm willing to listen to other people. So if that's your pleasure, and you can tell us sometime between now and next Monday, okay? Anything else on this? One is, we have a grant-funded social worker you can see in this. Anything else you find interesting?
Yeah, I've got something here.
I thought you were going to ask how many vehicles they have versus how many
Versus how many people?
versus how many people. How many
No.
extra vehicles do we have? I was waiting for that a lot.
And I talked with Bill about this very briefly, but my understanding is the government channel is under city council due to some previous administration years, a couple administrations ago. There was some conflict over what the government channel's role was. Personally, I don't, and I think they do a wonderful job, but I don't feel that, I think they belong more appropriately under a different city department, other than council itself.
This way, we have
Same for
nobody
the network
with...
systems administrator.
I would say that, in argument, just for sake of argument, that And if there are 6 or 5 of you that want to change it, okay. With council, you don't really have such an interest in it, what goes on. And there was a time, and there will be a time in the future where somebody somehow may abuse power. I didn't see it happening in the near term, but I think that there's a certain protection here for the press, that is, or for the Fourth Estate that is out there. Anybody else want to weigh in on that one? Oh, you are one.
Yeah, she is one, yeah, full-time.
I had a job for her, too. Anybody else on that one? Tell me if you are so inclined with the government channel. Chief Information Officer, half with us. Okay. Lands and Buildings. Notice we have the custodians all in Lands and Buildings. I was asking the mayor if you wouldn't consider or want to consider farming them out to various locations. That would get rid of a vehicle. But we don't have time to do it now, but another thing. Notice the police department. It's roughly, this is about $3 million, looks like. A data clerk, 4 communication officers, they do a wonderful job. 6 lieutenants, 20 patrol officers, a social worker on the grant, a police captain, and the police chief. Okay. So we have very great, we have great people working for us, but this is our staffing level situation. 1 administrative assistant that I forgot. Parking enforcement, streets. Notice Recreation has, if you just slip down the list, the 270,940, 271,940. Notice how few people we have permanently in Recreation. We rely so much on those part-time people.
Yeah, and having noted that in some of my brief discussions with Rich, the director, knowing that we've added a second dog park and soccer fields, that's one of his observations, that they're tricky for them at the moment, possibly requesting in the future more help or assistance there with taking care of the lands. So that's something that he threw out at me last week when we were talking.
He ought to really request that of the mayor, and see how the resources might be reallocated.
Okay.
Lands and building, that.
Because it is a great deal of land we're talking about.
So he specifically mentioned the land?
Cutting grass and...
Yeah, that's an acquisition that we've acquired. Well, and also Arts West. These are changes that in his tenure or the positions that, since he's been with the city 7 or 8 years, I believe, a change that he's witnessed is more additional resources that we have with Arts West, and then the soccer fields and a second dog park. Well, 2 dog parks, but now a second dog park. So
Plus all of that land across the ridge, but he doesn't probably do very much on that. There's something to be considered with the custodians, maybe 6 and maybe weighing off the relationship between those, the 6 custodians, and potentially
Would you
land.
want them to cut grass, is that what you're saying?
I would say that, I've heard people say, including the previous mayor, that maybe the number of custodians is a tad high. Maybe you could take the position and reprogram it in the summer, too.
sort of like a
I
jack
can
of all
take a look at
trades.
it. But again, soccer fields, sandlot leagues, sports stuff, yeah, it's been increasing quite a bit, but I suppose
Well,
it's
I've been
awfully
looking
good.
forward to see those receipts go up in the budget. Because it's been kind of stable for a while. I know soccer's your big one. Speaking as an old soccer mom. Okay. Water is, again, I'm mainly doing this because we have so many newbies, but we have water administration, where 10% of the assistant safety service director is, an accounts administrator, the director of water and sewer is half there, and a meter reader is there. And then we have another fund, which is 635, water maintenance, and this is where the people who do our work in the field, let's see, maintenance. I couldn't find that 5 for a moment. I thought, where are the people that do the work on the lines? They're there. And then we have the treatment plant, that has, and you have the instrument technician there, and it mirrors what you also find in the sewer, where you have the maintenance component, which is the line people, the administration, which is utility billing and administration, and then you have the treatment plant. And as you look at the budget, 637, 636, 635, you can see how it breaks out. Although we don't have any employees exactly in this garbage fund, we do have our solid waste specialists there, and then 10% of the assistant safety service directors also pick up this fund. And then internal service fund, the mechanics, and part of the chief information officer. And maybe about a month ago, we talked about the internal service fund. I believe Kathy kind of walked us through how they were using a new program or a new algorithm or a new model to figure out how to pay for the mechanics and the chief information officer. Yes?
And that would end up in the budget would be under the transaction class 600s, I assume. And I haven't put those in yet because, again, it varies on that final number that you get for both internal services and other.
Ray told me under I thought he said under 200s and 300s.
It's been in the 300s.
Do you want it still in the 300s? Why would you put it in the 300s?
Because he told me so. I mean,
Okay.
I believe that.
I mean, I look at it as a transfer between departments rather than a service.
Well, we changed that a few years ago, and I know we talked about this today, and
Okay.
I just didn't go on and explain this, because the auditors, they don't look at it as a transfer, they look at it as an expense for one department and revenue for another. So it comes out of 2 and 300s as an
Okay,
expense.
so I leave it in the 200s.
As opposed to just a transfer.
Okay, now I have more work to do. Great.
I have everything in there but what you want for 200s. I have the utilities and the internal service and other admin, because that was my job. In the spreadsheet I handed you a week ago.
Yeah, but that was, the estimates on the energy were quite high. I mean, if you're trying.
Because 1.4 is what I would that's what I'm getting ready for at home. I don't know.
Okay. Well, I'm aware of that, but that would,
Maybe Allah will save us next week and we'll be able
No,
to ride off
I'm
into the sun.
just
Hold my
thinking
breath
that
on that.
the entire, transaction class 200, 300 will go up quite a bit, because I have been lowballing those. Because, again, where else do you take it from? I mean, do you take
Well,
it from?
that's exactly the point. That's why, I think I tried to separate out the energy, so we don't get to the end of the year and have a huge bill to pay from the sewer plant or from the water treatment plant. I mean, not that those people, neither of those plants would necessarily do it, but I just, no more surprises, because we are so tight. All right, last thing, you have the slotting, which will help you to understand maybe, who our employees are and where they are in the steps. And their anniversary dates are on there. And we didn't put down, no, we didn't, did we? That's probably okay. It is very confusing. The result of the study was a chart that's almost unreadable. We were just trying to figure out who was in the upper reaches. If you're familiar with other places where they have like the entry-level position over here, and then you have the midpoint, and then you have the maximum. And so we have the people starting out somewhere in the lower reaches, depending on their agreement with their hiring officer. The auditor hires someone. She has discretion within a number of steps, and then each year they move through the steps. And then every so often, we should raise the entire pay scale up. Right now, it's anybody's guess what the cost of living changes are, but fundamentally, this move goes on. And then they reach the top, and potentially then, some employees are topped out. Now, what would that mean with respect to our particular system? What it used to mean, and it's so hard because I've talked to some of the senior people. After you've learned your job, you're at sort of the top of your game, and then you have a 6% longevity bonus that goes on the top. That's the way I think it was designed. So you have, you continue on, but it's not added to your base. But 6% of these salaries is a fair amount of money. Nice Christmas club. But, when I say that to people, they say, oh, that's just seniority. I say, but it's part of your salary. And last year, when Joe and I were talking with Beverly and the mayor, we were saying, well, why don't we just put it all together? So, you start thinking that as part of your compensation. Because 6% is amazing for those high-end people. And so, we do have a lot of money moving out the door in the next couple of weeks. But, and so we're always in this kind of tension. And then the other tension part of this is that some of the new employees who were hired in the recent past are not eligible. And that is going to take Solomon and all of his potential or her potential to figure out how we're going to work that one through. Luckily, I'm not going to probably, it's in about 5 or 10 years, there's going to be a problem. Jim might be here, but I don't think. Okay. Let's see, are we 9 o'clock? 4 minutes. Should I just, no, I'm not going to talk anymore. But you see where these are coming out. This is what we do. This is fundamentally our task.
Yes.
And keep this little thing and see if there's something, if you have any feedback on anything we've talked about, if you want Allahu proposal, which you mentioned, you want to talk about any of this, just get right on the phone or get on the email. Yeah.
Just for information's sake, which Kathy gave me earlier today, the longevity projected for next year will be $267,000 total.
I didn't want to say that word out loud in public, but I had added it to my 100s on my spreadsheet. $267,000. So when you talk about pay for people, then you have to think in terms of the compensation being your hourly rate plus the longevity. But then there are some people that have the hourly rate, but no, so it's not a problem now, but it will be a problem in the future. I hope somebody who's very wise figures out what we will do about that. Because it's certainly an expense that is amazing. Yeah.
I'll also point out, by looking at the pay grades that are listed in, I think in not so much in staffing ordinance, but you have some of the higher ones you're talking about, you have a max, mid, and minimum. And then you have the ability to hire 25% from the baseline. 25% of the baseline, if you look at it, is usually past the midpoint in many cases, in some cases. We've got a very compressed pay grade that you're talking about. So just be aware of that.
I think that there have been times in my memory where we have, and I think I encouraged you with respect to the co-director, that if we get someone we like, I think you ought to come in and ask for changes in that. I just think we have to do that because for someone coming in, they wouldn't be eligible for longevity. But I think in the real world, what has happened is our salaries are maybe, well, I'm not going to say that word. Forget it. I'm going to stop right now. Anybody, question, comment? Is this fun or what?
It's what?
It's what? Think about the ranges and how it works, because by June we're going to have to be looking at this again. Not we personally, but we'll be going over it again. We'll be having, unless I hear strenuous objections, we'll be having back to the old way of doing internships, and with some tinkering, with the understanding that we will absolutely, if we need someone to do, let's say, Green Fleet, we'll put that money out there. But, this is just for the gopher type positions, where people are there day in, day out. There'll be a change in from as needed back to an absolute number, and we're going to have a response to the number. And it may be the case that, if you want to have 10, I'm not talking about streets, but if you want 2 interns, then maybe something else will have to go. Because we are, with potential gas increases and electric increases, which are working their way through the Public Utilities Commission, I would think that, we have to be very prudent on this. And so, it's just like home. Everybody's talking about how they don't go out to dinner, they don't do this,
Frugal.
they don't do that. What?
Being frugal.
Being frugal.
And I view the question about, the concern about interns and part-time exactly the same way as this soft hiring freeze that we talked about earlier. some of these positions are critical in certain instances, and we just have to make sure that they're well researched before the department head, the budgetary person comes and says, we need a part-time person here, an additional intern or whatever. It just needs to be very well documented. And I think your conversation with the recreation director might lead us to some of those positions that the need is well documented, and we'll need to see what we can adjust to accommodate it.
But you might also remind him that we did cut their contribution to other admin and the
Yeah.
internal service fund. And so at some point, you can say Arts West until the cows come home, but at some point, they've got to ramp up their receipts. Like that. You're not able to do it. We need to send somebody who's a little bit more.
Well, maybe it's a subtle philosophical difference in.
Oh, you're going to just be sweetness and light, huh? Tell them we need some more receipts.
Okay.
Okay. We are adjourned.
I'll let his boss tell him that.
Yeah, hold on.
Oh, go ahead.
Okay,
We can finish.
we're adjourned. Did we make it? 9:02. 9:02. There we go.
Not quite 8:20.
Wasn't it-